Hi, welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Stacey Herbert. We have a worldwide exclusive here. Everybody in the UK, BBC Newsnight, BBC One, The Week. They wanted to talk to who I have here, Max Keiser.
Yes, it's incredible. Suddenly the BBC Newsnight, they realize I've been right all along. They've been emailing me, come to London, be on the show to talk about
Barclays LIBOR, L-I-E-BOR, LIBOR.
Well, I figure, why speak for or about Bob Diamond when we can get Bob Diamond in the studio? So let's get Bob Diamond. He's here to talk about Barclays directly. Hi, I'm Bob Diamond. I run Barclays Bank in the UK. Yeah, I'm as guilty as sin. I am involved in massive fraud with the LIBOR market, interest rates, manipulation, insider trading. That's me, Bob Diamond.
Now, Max, the reason why I think all these BBC News programs wanted to have you on is because of your infamous Dave Cameron STFU, where you told him in no uncertain terms that you can't have plundering in the City of London and then outlaw it in the rest of society in response to the riots that happened. So I'm going to wind back to those riots and also to the present day and see how David Cameron responded to those riots and now as he's responding to the wide-scale crime, the fraud that has happened at Barclays. David Cameron on the 28th of June says people have to take responsibility for the actions and show how they're going to be accountable for these actions. So then we cut back to a year ago, Max. David Cameron, 10th of August, 2011. Here he is responding to 10, 12-year-old children who rioted. If you're old enough to commit the crime, you are old enough to face the punishment, calling for prison terms for these guys, these little kids.
Oh, yes, but if you're senile like Bob Diamond and committing fraud in your sleep and you claim you have no responsibility because you're feeble in the mental capacity and you couldn't not commit a crime if your life depended on it because you were born in a criminal atmosphere, you live in a criminal... He's like born in a test tube baby of crime. His mother was pure sin and his father was larceny. And in the test tube it was Bob Diamond, criminal. He's sprung onto the loins of the fraudulent banking system in the City of London to wreak havoc wherever he goes, wherever he touches, it turns into criminal behavior. He's got the reverse Midas touch. Put Bob Diamond in a room and everything turns to garbage.
So this is their first instinct, Max. He's telling this criminal organization, show us how you're going to be accountable for these actions. It's usually that we show you, we are telling you how we are going to make you responsible and pay for your crimes.
Yeah, it's disgusting the way the government fawns and defers to hardened criminals like this. And the media is no better. The Guardian newspaper runs a story saying, Barclays attempted to manipulate interest rates. No, Guardian! They manipulated interest rates! Scratch the word attempted! Be a journalist for a change!
Well, in fact, let's look at the other media, because when you did that David Cameron STFU, it was in response to a Telegraph piece. Now, here is the Telegraph last week about Bob Diamond and Barclays. Is it time to consider locking up bankers? And this journalist here at the Telegraph says, we don't want to be considered left-wing because, they all hate bankers. But that doesn't mean that outrageous, greedy behavior should be tolerated. It's not outrageous, greedy behavior. It's criminal behavior.
Look, they're committing crimes. And the reason people are not more outraged is because people are misinformed because of the press that refers to Bob Diamond's crimes as an attempt, as alleged. That's not true. Just because he paid a fine in exchange for being able to say that he won't do it again or that officially he doesn't have to cop to being guilty of the crime doesn't make it any less of a crime. And folks shouldn't simply buy into this trifecta of crime, whether it's the Bank of England, the so-called regulators, and Bob Diamond, that they're able to get away with covering each other's butt, that they should then buy into this by giving the verbiage and the rhetoric that covers the crime. They're as guilty and culpable in this crime as anybody involved in this conspiracy, this actual conspiracy involving all these parties, Serious Fraud Office, FSA, Barclays, Cameron, Osborne, and the press in the UK, including The Guardian. This is a conspiracy, a racket. The result is people are suffering. Austerities being imposed upon them unnecessarily in a cruel and unusual fashion from the government, whose only motivation can be sadism, because there's no economic justification for not locking up the criminals, but forcing society to undergo massive, cruel, and unusual austerity.
So again, turning to this paper, Max, the Telegraph, where they're saying, should we consider maybe possibly locking up these people for outrageous behavior? Right, here they are, last year, August 2011, UK riots, young yobs back on streets despite David Cameron's pledge. Young offenders who took part in the rioting and looting that blighted Britain's streets this week are walking free from court without having to face significant penalties. Despite David Cameron's promise that they would face punishment, a string of juvenile criminals have been allowed to return home with their parents. So these are genuinely 10, 11, 12-year-old boys who they want to lock up in prison, not going crying home to mommy. Now, here we have a 50-year-old man who goes crying to his central banking mommy, Mervyn King, who's providing, they just need to clean up their little culture, that maybe they should be a little bit nicer and steal less.
Right, well, Bob Diamond is such a little prat, isn't he? Crying to his mommy, Mervyn King, for a bailout. And, at the time, when this story broke, I suggested that they give these kids banking licenses to go work at banks like Barclays because they're proven looters. They could boost the GDP of Britain by hiring these kids to work at an establishment like Barclays, which is now unequivocally in the business of looting. Hire the next generation of looters, Bob. I mean, you're so greedy. You won't even share the loot with other looters. That's how greedy this guy is.
So again, everybody was unanimously decided that 10, 12, 13-year-old boys should be sentenced to long-term prison sentences for their looting of a $4 bottle of water. Well, ministers have spoken of removing benefits and council housing from those convicted of rioting or looting. Now let's compare that to today, Barclays. Let's go over to the New York Fed primary dealers list. Who's there? Barclays.
Right, the primary dealers are the 18 or so banks between the governments and the market who are either buying or selling bonds in a way that gives them rent seeking on the entire bond market. It's free money to them that they claim is a necessity to maintain markets and maintain liquidity by giving these guys a subsidy, just like every welfare queen, Bob Diamond, the welfare queen, gets the subsidy by being a primary dealer. By the way, they gave them Lehman Brothers for next to nothing after they engineered the collapse of that bank. Another gift to Bob.
Well, headline reads, "I won't go," says Bob Diamond, despite calls from Prime Minister for him to resign over market rigging scandal. Again, look at that headline, market rigging scandal. This is a crime. It is in the crime pages of the newspapers. It's not a little scandal. But Bob Diamond was able to say, "I'm not going to go." David Cameron, STFU, he said to him.
All right, well, I mean, the scandals and the crimes are coming fast and furious, to coin a phrase. I mean, you've got this happening with Bob Diamond on top of the, $9 billion that was revealed at JP Morgan's balance sheet that they involved in another massive trading fraud, on top of the MF Global, Jamie Dimon again, stole money from customers, on top of AIG, on top of the last 4 years, on top of all the banking scandals. They're getting bigger, they're getting more outrageous. It's moral hazard, you could call it, or just a crime wave.
Well, Max, here's a headline, mis-selling derivatives. Barclays, RBS, HSBC, and Lloyds banned from selling interest rate hedging products. UK lenders, Barclays, RBS, HSBC, and Lloyds, have agreed to stop selling interest rate hedging products to small and medium enterprises after regulator Financial Services Authority found them guilty of mis-selling derivatives products. Again, notice the terminologies there. They missold them. It's not a crime. Just stop, please, please don't defraud small and medium-sized enterprises with these complex derivatives that they don't know what it is until it blows up in their face and destroys their enterprises.
Right, and the necessity for some economic growth to hide the crimes is not forthcoming because the ability for the global economy to absorb all the toxic debt that Bob Diamond and others floated to fund their lifestyles and of master criminal minds has hit the proverbial wall, and they simply can't grow their way out of it because the globe can only absorb so much debt, and then it collapses. And in the UK, they have one of the highest debt to GDP ratios in the world. They can't put on any more debt. Bob Diamond is simply trying to say that, well, I won't do it again. I'll pay a small fine. Please don't, look at my books. I mean, if you looked at Barclay's books closely, you would find a whole litany of additional criminal behavior. But who's going to do that? The FSA, the SFO, they're totally compromised by these banks to claim to be self-regulated. There's nobody actually going to do any forensic look into the books of these banks like Barclays.
But again, a theme on the Keiser Report over the past few years has been the fact that there's this absence of justice. These crime waves happen because a certain select group of men are able to get away with blatant crimes. Now let's look at these, compare Rupert Murdoch to the guy who hacked Scarlett Johansson's phone. Here's Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch snubs Britain and says he will invest his billions in the US. He says he has moved on after abandoning B-Sky B bid amid phone hacking scandal. Again, it's a scandal when it's a crime that a big guy has committed. Rupert Murdoch appears to have turned his back on Britain following his humiliation over the phone hacking scandal. He says he's no longer going to invest in the UK. Now, Max, this guy Chris Cheney, who hacked the phone of Scarlett Johansson, hacker owes Scarlett Johansson $66,000 over nude photos, feds say. A man who hacked the email accounts of celebrities should pay movie stars Scarlett Johansson $66,000 in compensation, federal prosecutors said, and should serve 71 months in prison.
Yeah, I don't get Murdoch's statement that he's been humiliated. He's been not humiliated. He's now splitting up his company into two, again using Wall Street tricks to boost his balance sheet because he himself can't grow a business. If you took away his illegal activity, his wiretapping, his coercion, his influence peddling, there's nothing left. He's got state-sanctioned monopolies, wiretapping, and influence peddling. And he bought the Wall Street Journal at the top. He's the worst businessman of the century. And here he's been humiliated? No, what would be humiliating is if he was facing, let's say, the death penalty, and on his way to the chair, he relieved himself, in his pants. That would be humiliating and a just end to a guy who has made a mockery of politicians around the world, in particular in the UK, made Tony Blair look like an idiot, made David Cameron and his folks look like idiots. I mean, he should really be humiliated, not just forced to bilk some other country out of billions. That's not a humiliation.
Okay, and finally, Max, on this story, I have to say that look at what the federal prosecutors in America are very certain that one act of hacking a phone requires 71 months in prison. Here is an organization that routinely, for decades, hacked the phones of royalty, of the prime minister, of the chancellor, took medical records, they bribed policemen, and they still don't know. We're having this little inquiry that's going to determine nothing, and that's it.
Yeah, and it's not a scandal. It's criminal behavior. Again, the press omits the fact that it is criminal behavior, and they use this word scandal.
No, it's only criminal behavior, Max, if it's not a big guy. Big guys are in the news.
Oh, exactly. All right, well, keep that in mind. Stacey Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away, much more coming away. Stay right there. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to New York and speak with Connecticut-based journalist and blogger Terry Boole, the third most dangerous financialist journalist in the world. You can find all of her work at her website, terryboole.com. Terry Boole, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Hi, Max. How are you doing? It's good to see you. #1 financial journalist in the world.
Now, Terry Boole, you were the first to break the news that senior executives are being told at JP Morgan the loss at their chief investment office in London is closer to $9 billion, not $2 billion. You were the first to break this, so tell us more.
You're right, Max. So, I got this phone call. It was actually last weekend, and there were a few JP Morgan managing directors who were being told there are internal models and that the loss could be as much as $9 billion. That doesn't mean they're going to book it all in the second quarter, but that was a really scary number. And they started to call and ask me, what else do you know about JP Morgan? What other problems do we have? How do you think this is going to affect our bonuses? I couldn't believe the $9 billion number at first, but then I checked with a few more managing directors, and they kept saying, yeah, we're hearing the same thing. And it's important, I think, to note that we don't know what they're going to book in the second quarter. It is obviously very evident, though, that they are planning for a very worst-case disaster on this trade. And what's more interesting is we have to question, when did this $9 billion estimate come about? Because it was likely before Jamie Dimon stepped forward to Congress and said, you know, we're going to make a profit this quarter, and I think we're going to be fine.
Right. And we understand that Jamie Dimon was going to be testifying under oath, but he couldn't get him to do that. Now we know why. Now, Terry Bull, J.P. Morgan shares have dropped 6% on your report. Jamie Dimon argues that these losses don't matter. What do you say?
Right. I think Jamie Dimon is not being honest with his shareholders and knows that this is a serious problem. What Jamie Dimon has on his side, though, is these lovely little accounting tricks that they get to use, right? So let's say the number's huge. Let's say it really is $9 billion. When it come time to book the trade, this is not a hedging trade, Max, and that's what I think everyone needs to understand. JP Morgan actually disclosed that in their financial statements that they filed with the SEC. This is a for-profit trade. So what that means is at the end of each month, they get to book where the trade is at. They know what the number is right now. They don't have to tell shareholders, though, till the end of the quarter, okay? So, you know, this could be whatever the trade is in that moment that they're going to book. But we don't know what the real loss is until they unwind the trade. They have to sell everything, right? And so on top of that, think about this. If, say the number's really bad and they go and they have to book $5 billion and the revenue is only $3.5 billion, which is what analysts are estimating right now for the second quarter, JP Morgan could go sell the furniture in all their foreclosed homes, right, to make up for that trading loss. And if it's really bad, they could just sell all their foreclosed homes. I mean, it's all a game. And I think the serious question is, why aren't we telling shareholders the truth? Because this is about risk management, not the number that they're going to lose, but the fact that he dropped the ball. His eye was not on the ball, and this is a massive risk they took.
Right. Well, I know from working on Wall Street that one of the tricks you play is you put 10 or 20 positions on, and you don't provide the account numbers. And then you get toward the end of the quarter, and you manufacture an earnings number based on what trades you close and what trades you leave open. And JP Morgan does this, as do all banks on Wall Street. But this clearly is a trade that went out of control. And so the question, Terry Bull, is this the beginning of an Enron type situation where the balance sheet gets completely out of control and eventually the stock goes to zero?
Unfortunately, I don't think JP Morgan stock is ever going to go to zero. I do think that there is an enormous amount of room for them to wipe out earnings in the next 3 quarters at least, for 2 reasons, Max. Number 1, we have our trade loss, right, on our prop trade, out of control. Number 2, which I've talked about on this show multiple times, is the $120 billion in mortgage security putback suits that they are going to have to start to pay, and they're going to have to reserve more in their litigation reserves. There was a recent court decision that came down by a federal judge, Judge Crotty, which actually ruled in favor of all the monolines, those are the insurers, that said, guess what? If you can prove that JP Morgan, via Bear Stearns, didn't represent the mortgage-backed securities, okay? You don't even have to prove fraud. If you can say the reps and warranties were a lie, were not right, we're going to give you back all the mortgage bonds that you bought. You get your money back. That's a huge ruling, and we don't even know if that's going to affect institutional investor yet. There's so much on the plate for JP Morgan. There's something else, Max, that I've learned about. There was a hedge fund that they ran. It was a mega billion-dollar hedge fund called Highland Capital. And Highland's being sued by UBS because they did some really allegedly illegal stuff in valuing their assets during the financial crisis so they could get more money from UBS and not blow up. Okay, well, there was a whistleblower that came forward. They sent 36,000 pages to the SEC detailing how JP Morgan's back office helped them cover up this fraud. The SEC is sitting on this information right now. And as of this month, UBS was able to get a Stanford court judge in Stamford, Connecticut, a state judge to rule that all those files have to be released. There's an attorney right now out of Greenwich, Connecticut. He's kind of a famous attorney named Mark Sherman, who's threatening to not turn them over for the whistleblower because he's worried that J.P. Morgan's going to do something to the whistleblower, but he's going to have to. The court's going to order it, and so it's one thing on top of another. Additionally, Max, I just read a story today that there was a bribery charge that a company did with J.P. Morgan. It was a data storage company, and they paid him a few $100,000 for a $12 million contract, but they just settled with the Eastern District of New York, with the DOJ, and said, yeah, we paid J.P. Morgan bribes for this deal. And they have to pay like $6 million for it. I mean, the fraud inside this bank is out of control, and I think more and more, the facts are coming forward.
Okay, you mentioned the mortgage putbacks, you mentioned the brewing scandals. All of these require some additional liquidity, some money to pay off. At the same time, around the world, because of the Basel III Accord being implemented, banks are being asked to increase their collateral value, to improve their balance sheets. So really, Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan are getting squeezed on both fronts. All of their past crimes are catching up to them with margin calls. At the same time, the international banks are being asked to increase their collateral. How can they survive this pincer movement?
You're right, Max. I think it's something to pay attention to. I think it's a scary number. I think there's some media outlets like CNBC who don't pay attention to the reality of what's really happening here. Instead, yesterday we saw them just working a PR angle for JP Morgan, saying, oh, everything's going to be fine. This second quarter losses are only going to be like $4 to $6 billion. But what they didn't mention is exactly what you just said. As the loss keeps growing and more problems come up, where are they going to get this magical collateral to save? They have to increase their Tier 1 capital, right? That's less money to lend to people, to lend to Main Street.
Right, and that means less...
These are serious issues for them.
Right, and less lending means less fees, less revenue, less profit. And if the subsidies from the U.S. government are shut down, as we know 77% of last quarter's earnings were a direct result of U.S. government subsidies, this company is going to be left for dead. Now, what about in London? You've got Bruno Ixel. Two questions. Is he still with the firm? And the second question is, doesn't London, as the epicenter of global banking fraud, make a mockery of regulations like the Frank Dodd bill in the U.S.?
Okay, Max, I don't know if the trader is still at the firm. I imagine if he's there, I think that he left. Actually, I think there was a news report, although personally I would have kept him at the firm to pay him $1 and make him unwind the damn trade, right? I think as far as Dodd-Frank goes, right now what we've seen, and Francine McKenna, who writes for American Banker, has been on this show, she continually writes to remind people that right now people can just go to London. People can go to London to avoid Dodd-Frank. And they're doing it more and more, which is exactly what we just saw in JP Morgan. So it's really going to have to be global regulators who get together, a rarity, right, and decide, okay, let's police these banks together.
Yes, well, Mervyn King, who runs the Bank of England in the UK, is now making a statement to the effect that we really need to rein in these out-of-control banks, like Barclays Bank in the UK, for example, that's been caught up in the LIBOR bid rigging and interest rate rigging scandal. Do you think that there will be any kind of substantive response from regulators, or is it going to be the same status quo, meaning that regulators, we know, are in the pockets of the banks and there'll be no penalties or any deterrence whatsoever? It's Terry Bull.
Right. Okay, well, Ian Fraser, he's a UK journalist, writes this consistently. He calls the FSA a joke. And so do most European traders that I talk to. So I'm not counting on the FSA doing anything. The British government, maybe they could create a new agency. I don't know. Right now, I think London's a free-for-all. They're desperate for money themselves. They're going to let bankers do whatever the hell they want. As far as the U.S., yeah, I think Dodd-Frank is trying to get a little bit stricter. I think that the U.S. government and the Congress and the Senate is actually trying to do something. But, Max, if you can figure out how to commit fraud, Wall Street's always been able to do it for over 100 years, right?
Okay, so I want to just return in the time we have left, Terry Bull, to just give us a little bit more on the monoline lawsuits. This is another one of your stories that you broke, that you've been on top of from the beginning. Just give us, we have about a minute or so, just a little background and a little update on that, because I think this is going to be really an explosive situation going forward.
Okay, thanks, Max. Right now we have a Syncora lawsuit. Syncora was a monoline who's going to move forward to trial the earliest, but that's not till the beginning of next year. On the plate right now is that decision I just talked about, where a judge said it's going to be much easier to sue JP Morgan because you don't have to prove every single loan that defaulted. You can just prove that Bear Stearns lied, which I believe they did, in their mortgage security contracts, and as a result of that lie, JP Morgan is going to have to pay you back billions and billions and billions of dollars for those lies, okay? So the question will be, who else is going to sue? If they've already listed that there's 120 billion of lawsuits, I mean, there could be more, actually. You could have anyone who ever bought a mortgage-backed securities from Bear Stearns file a lawsuit. And let me tell you this, the lawyers at Patterson Belknap, who have done all the work for the monolines and discovery and private eyes and research and getting over 30 whistleblowers to come over, they are getting phone calls of the yin yang asking, how can we sue Bear Stearns and JP Morgan also? This is a really real number. I don't know when it's going to hit, but it's going to hit, and it could be quarters of revenue wiped out.
All right, well, Terry Boole, we'll have to have you back on and talk about it. We're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Bye-bye, Max, and congratulations on your engagement.
Yes, thank you so much. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and my fiancée, Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Terry Boole. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.